Happy Wednesday to you again. If you'll get out your green reading book, I want you to open it up to, let me see, I want you to open it up to page 126. It's called The Little Maid. And I'm going to read it to you. How about that? The Little Maid. And this is a true story. It's from Kings, 2 Kings actually. And it's the 5th chapter if you want to read it on your own from your Bible. The Little Maid. And the first chapter is called Captain Naaman the Leper. Okay? So we're on page 126. And you can read along with me as I read orally. The little maid passed Captain Naaman's room. He had a dreadful illness called leprosy. Large sores that would not heal had spread over his skin. All the doctors in Syria did not know how to make him well. I know some things just by reading those few words. I know it has something to do with a little maid because it's in the title, and it's the first 3 words. I know that Naaman is some kind of a military man because he's called a captain. So he must be someone who maybe gives orders to someone else. I do know he has a funny name because he has 3 A's in his name. Now that's pretty unusual right there. I know that he had a bad disease. They called it dreadful. Now when the disease is dreadful, it's not just like having a cold or having an owie on your knee because you fell off your bicycle. I mean, what's dreadful? It means it's really serious. Very serious, in fact. Large sores that would not heal had spread over his skin. And this was a bad disease in Bible days. It was the disease of leprosy. We do have leprosy a little bit, but now we have ways to treat it. Back in these days, once you had leprosy, you did not get well. You had to live by yourself in quarantine, by yourself always. You couldn't be with other people ever again. And no one wanted leprosy. They did not know how it spread. They didn't know if it spread by sneezing or touching something that someone else had leprosy attached. It was a scary disease, almost like our virus here. It's been kind of a scary disease, trying to keep everybody safe and everybody at home, and that's why you're there and I'm here, just so that we all can keep safe the best we can. So it's kind of the same way. So it was a very yucky disease in Bible days. He lived in a place called Syria. And he must have had a lot of money. And the reason I'm thinking of that is that all the doctors in Syria couldn't make him well. Okay, when you go to a doctor, you have to pay money. Okay? And today we have insurances that help pay some of our money, pay some of our bills. But back in this day, I don't think there was anything called insurance. So he had gone to doctor after doctor after doctor in the whole land of Syria, and nothing had worked. They could not heal him. Leprosy was not a disease that they knew how to heal. All right. I know all that by reading those first few words. Let's go down to the second paragraph. The little maid was busy all afternoon helping her mistress, but her mistress did not say a word. Once the little maid found her crying in the garden. There's the picture on the bottom of page 126. You can see the little maid. That's the little girl. I'm kind of guessing she's about your age, maybe a little bit older, but about there. And she has this woman here, and she calls her a mistress. So I'm trying to think, okay, is this Captain Naaman's helper? Is she a servant lady that works in his house? Is she his wife? I don't really know by reading so far. I'm just kind of keeping that in my mind, okay? So I need to figure out, is this his wife or is this just a lady that helps in the palace? Because it sounds like there was, Mr. Naaman was probably pretty, had a lot of money. So I think maybe he did live in a fancier house than most of us do. All right. And we know that the little girl is a helper to the mistress, okay? And one day the mistress was crying. You can see tears in her eyes, and she was crying in the garden. Okay? That's how much I know from reading page 126. Let's look on page 127. Oh, mistress, do not weep, she said, bringing her a cool cloth to wipe away her tears. Her mistress shook her head. Captain Naaman is very ill, she said. Tears came to the little maid's eyes. Will they get better? She asked. No, her mistress answered. Captain Naaman will never fight in great battles again. He will never get better. I wish I could help him, the little maid said. If only my master would go to the prophet Elisha in my home country. Elisha could heal him. Okay, now I know some more things. I'm kind of feeling that this lady must not be Mr. Naaman's wife, because she keeps calling him Captain Naaman. You know, I don't really think that a wife would call her husband like that. Now, that seems a little strange. So I'm thinking she might be just a helper in the house. But she really does love him, and she really wants to serve him well. And so that's why she is so sad. And so not only, first of all, the mistress was crying, and now the little girl's crying too, because tears came to her eyes, because now they both realize that Mr. Naaman is not going to get better, because he has this bad disease. Remember the name? Yep, leprosy. You're right. Then this little girl says some unusual things. She says, if the master, Mr. Naaman, could go to see Elisha, Elisha could heal him. Now, wait a minute. That's pretty peculiar. Because didn't we just learn that all the doctors in Syria couldn't cure him? And yet the little girl said Elisha could heal him. Well, that was a pretty bold statement. Let's hear what the lady says. Just then a servant walked past the garden and heard them talking. What did you say, child? He asked. I heard of many great works that Elisha did when I lived near him. He's a prophet of the one true God, she said. The servant hurried on his way, but he didn't forget the girl's words. All right. This girl was not born in Syria. She has moved to Syria for some reason, and now she is a helper in Captain Naaman's house, mostly for the mistress there. But she knows of the one true God. You see, Syria was probably a land of idol worship. Most of the lands that didn't know anything about God worshiped some kind of idol. So she knew that Elisha was the prophet of the one true God. And aren't we blessed to know that there's only one true God? A lot of stuff out there, but there's only one true God. And fortunately, we know that God. Okay, next page. Master, he said, kneeling by Naaman's side, may we take you to Elisha, your wife's little maid's... Oh, well, I was totally wrong. Look at that. Dear me. It is his wife. Well, she was very respectful when she called him Captain Naaman, wasn't she? Anyway, your wife's little maid says that he can heal you. You can be well again. Elisha, Naaman asked. Yes, he's a prophet of God. The little maid is sure he can heal you, the serpent said. Then we'll leave tomorrow, said Naaman. That just is so interesting to me. My. All because a little girl said that Elisha could do this. They're all willing to pack up and go to where Elisha is. And the servant, it must be a man, the servant who overheard, remember on the page 127, the servant was a man because he did not forget the girl's words. He was a grown man, and yet he was listening to this little girl who talked about this one true God, and that this one true God was going to heal him. That takes some faith right there. And Naaman, who we don't even know if he was a worshiper, probably a worshiper of idols, he did not know that. He did not know the one true God. And yet he was believing her. And that little bit of faith made him pack up his silver, his gold, his beautiful clothes, and he was going to give some of those things to Elisha to pay him. And Naaman climbed into the chariot. So they packed silver, gold, beautiful clothes for Elisha, and they're going to give those to Elisha like a payment, like he would pay for something. And Naaman's expecting to be well because of that little smidgen of faith that he had. Let's look on page 129. Days passed as they traveled on the hot, dusty roads. The horses trotted mile after mile, carrying Captain Naaman to Elisha. Now, Naaman was not well. You know, when you are sick and you don't feel well, you don't really feel like traveling. It's, you just want to stay home in your little bed. Just bring me some hot chicken soup and some hot tea, and I'll feel good. But he was willing to travel because he was expecting that this Elisha was going to be a healer. Days. Okay, it wasn't just like, a few hours. When you travel to Seattle, it takes about 6-7 hours, maybe at the most. Okay, this is not 6 or 7 hours. We're talking about days. And you can see these people are standing up in this chariot. That chariot usually wasn't a place for sitting. I don't know if it had any place to sit, maybe, but mostly they stood up. And Naaman probably wasn't doing the driving. It was probably, I guess you call it driving, but anyway, he wasn't, he wasn't whipping the horses and making them move. But nevertheless, he had to be in that cart, and it wasn't a comfortable ride. It only had 2 wheels, and the roads weren't like our roads today. They were bouncy and jouncy, and Naaman was bouncing around, and days after days after days. What I've learned in traveling through the years, I've learned that if you're going to take your family traveling, the first day everything goes pretty well. And if you're traveling across country, because I've done that many times, because Mr. Harbor's parents lived for years in Tennessee. Now they live in Georgia, but they lived in Tennessee. And so we would travel from time to time in a car from here to there, and it takes 5 days, 4 days. And first day, everything's, I've got 3 kids, and just a car, not a van, just a car. So 3 kids in the back seat of the car. Back before the days of iPads, videos, any of that stuff. Okay, so nothing like that. First day went really well. And the second day, not quite so good. Third day, all of us were ready to get out of that car. And we still had 1 more day to go. And by the time we landed at the grandparents' house, we were all ready. We were done. We were done traveling. And we weren't even sick. So I'm feeling sorry here for Mr. Naaman, who spent days in this little strange wagon thing, traveling to try to get to Elisha. As his chariot bumped along, Naaman thought about the prophet of God. Would Elisha stand in front of Naaman and call loudly to God to heal him? Would he strike the sores with his hand? Would the sores just disappear? Could the little maid's God heal him? At last, Captain Naaman arrived in Elisha's city. His chariot came to a stop in front of Elisha's door. Whew, we're here at last. So Naaman had all of these thoughts in his mind. What was going to happen? How was this going to work? How was Elisha going to heal? And he was trying to make, would it happen this way? Would it happen that way? Oh, he was just probably excited. And because he was in a wagon, it probably wasn't a very quiet ride these days. And when you're riding in your car or your van, usually it's a quiet ride. And you can talk to one another. But in this situation, you can't. Mr. Harper, as you know, was a private pilot and flew several little small airplanes across country from here to Tennessee usually. And when you're in a little plane, there is a lot of noise. And he was busy flying, and it was loud to talk, And so lots of times you just have private thoughts. And I think that's how so sometimes I would think that, oh, that's so beautiful. But I couldn't really tell the family, or I couldn't, disturb Mr. Harper because he was flying the airplane. And so after we would see something beautiful, or, you could talk, but you'd have to talk really loudly. So I think that Naaman, that's why he's doing this thinking, because he had a lot of time to think in these days as he was traveling on these hot roads to get to Elisha. But now he's there. He's at Elisha's door. Next page. Captain Naaman stepped down from the chariot. Inside the house, Elisha spoke quietly to his servant. The servant hurried to the door. He opened the door before Naaman could knock. Naaman, the servant said, Elisha sent me to tell you to go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your skin will be clean. You will be made well. Okay? So Naaman stepped down out of this chariot, and Elisha told the servant, Elisha's in the house, and he told his servant, go answer the door. And the servant opened the door, and he told Naaman these words, Elisha sent me to tell you to go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your skin will be clean and you will be made well. Okay, that's interesting. It does not appear that Naaman said anything about that he, needed healing, but Elisha already knew because he was a prophet of God, and he told him what to do. Wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your skin's going to be clean, and you're going to be all well. But Mr. Naaman, look what he says. Wash in the Jordan River 7 times. Are you kidding me? He said in an angry voice. He probably said more than that, too. He was mad. Oh, the Jordan River? Are you talking about this muddy river? Why in the world would that? How would that going to heal me? He was expecting some kind of fancy, God was going to come down, or God was going to perform this miracle in some fantastic way. Not washing in the Jordan River. He was so mad. Next page. Naaman turned to his servants. I thought Elijah would at least come out to talk to me. He just sent his servant to tell me to go wash in the dirty Jordan River. I can get the clean rivers at home to wash in. And he stomped away, muttering to himself. Into his chariot he climbed. So he was so mad. After all, Naaman was an important man. He was a captain. He had commanded people. And Elisha didn't even come out of his house. He sent his servant to tell him that. And Naaman says, this has got to be the stupidest thing I ever thought of. I have been riding in this chariot for how many days? And this is all I've got? This is not right. Master, one servant said, will you go to the Jordan River? And Naaman frowned and says, no, take me home. Naaman's servants turned sadly back to the chariots. Their master would never be well now. Then one servant ran up to Captain Naaman. Okay, so Naaman's mad. He's mad because Elisha was supposed to talk to him, and Elisha didn't do anything, and then he told him this silly thing by his servant, go wash in the river, and the river was all muddy. How in the world was that even going to help? So that little bit of faith that made Naaman leave his home in Syria in the first place is being tested. And he is stomping away, and he is saying, no, I am going home. No, I thought a funny thing here was the first servant that says, Master, will you go to the Jordan River? That guy there, he had a lot of nerve, because I don't know how it's you, but when people are upset, it's usually not a good time to try to get your word in edgewise, so to speak, and say, hey, Mommy, what about when you already know Mommy's upset, she's she's busy or she's got too much to think about, and then you decide, hey, don't you think that Jeremiah can come over and play this afternoon? And your mother says, are you kidding me? No, Jeremiah can't come over and play this afternoon. We have things to do. Can't you see it? Okay, you've been there. Okay, me too. There you go. So I thought that servant was very, very brave. Anyway, So the servant said their master would never get well again. But then there's one other servant. He comes up. Okay, look at the next page. Master, the servant said, if Elisha had asked you to do something hard, would you have done it? And another servant joined the first. Yes, master, if Elisha had asked you to do a great thing, you would have done it. Can't you do just this one easy thing? We want you to be made well, master. And Naaman looked at his faithful servants. Yes, he said, you're right. Take me to the Jordan River. Those servants loved their master. They wanted him to be well. They had been there in Syria when he had gone to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they all had said, there's no cure, Naaman. So they knew if he walked away from this situation, that he would never be cured. So they were pretty wise servants, saying, if you'd been asked to do something hard, you would have been brave enough to do that. Why don't you just do the easy thing, like Elisha has suggested? And Naaman's heart was touched, and he said, you're right. Take me to the Jordan River. That's where our story is going to end today. And tomorrow, you're going to finish the story and then take a little online quiz. And so tomorrow, you'll be reading page 132 to the end of the story. And I'll write that down for Mommy. So hope you enjoyed the story today. I certainly did. Okay, bye-bye.